this social justice cult that we are starting to see form.
Now we're speaking my language. Let's get into it. I came across a YouTube channel recently calling social justice a cult. When I started my channel, I swore I'd avoid this subject, and for the most part I have. But when somebody specifically comes out and says that social justice is a cult, I pretty much have to address it. I still don't intend to cover social justice subjects on this channel, but I'll make a single exception for this video. I want to preface this video by putting my history with social justice on record. I used to be an anti-SJW. Between 2014 and 2016, I was coming into the atheist movement on YouTube, and the atheist movement was getting into the anti-SJW movement. That's when it was really forming. I was on board with them for a long time. Pretty much all the biggest atheist channels were talking shit about social justice movements. And like I said, I agreed. I was with them. The social justice videos they were debunking needed to be debunked. These people were nuts. But as time went on, I saw them offering up more and more obviously fallacious arguments. One of the most popular fallacies I saw floating around was what's called the nut-picking fallacy. Here's the definition. A variety of straw man where one selects the looniest advocates of a position as representative of the best or the majority of the opposition. Then we got people like Dave Rubin, or the channel Computing Forever, talking about why they left the left. He said they all went crazy. Now, anybody who advocates for left-wing policy positions or equality, or talking about the fact that there are systemic problems in the US, is instantly labeled as one of those nuts, and their arguments are ignored. Don't get me wrong, some of the people that Rubin and the others have addressed are legitimately nuts, and their arguments really are ridiculous. Some of them don't align with science in any way. They're just making shit up and stating it as a fact. I'm not denying that's a problem. It is. But the bigger, more glaring problem that I'm seeing right now is the fact that prominent people within my community, the atheist community, have found a few nutbags, assume they represent the entire movement, take their crazy arguments, and look for any hint of those arguments being presented in mainstream places so they can say the arguments are spreading. It's a form of confirmation bias. So obviously we've got a serious problem going on in the US right now. The UN has issued criticisms of the US policing system and says it's something we need to address. It was only a matter of time before self-proclaimed skeptics come out of the woodwork and start making claims that the US doesn't have a problem at all. It's just a victim complex. Well, guess what? It's only been a couple weeks since the protests started, and we already have somebody doing it. So let's take a look at what they have to say. Quick note before we get into the clips. Obviously, I can't address every single argument. This video is 19 minutes long. I can't even address the weakest ones because some of his arguments are just baseless claims with zero evidence. Anyways, let's get into it.
Now, while Tucker went with that analogy, the one that I want to go with is actually what happened in North Korea after Kim Jong-il died. If you remember, there were reports of people crying on television, but being punished for not crying quite hard enough for the death of the dear leader.
So this guy is starting out with his claim that social justice is a cult, or that a social justice cult is forming, I guess, by pointing out what happened in North Korea after Kim Jong-il died. Dots aren't connected yet. Let's continue.
And I think that this is actually way more analogous to a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now in the post-rioting, more in the peaceful protest and social media activism phase.
Now hang on, he was just talking about North Korea, then he showed some clips of North Korea. Then he started talking about the protests, and then he showed some clips of North Korea. This is a propaganda technique called transfer propaganda. He gives an example of something objectively bad that we can all agree is bad, and then he starts talking about something that he wants to convince you is bad. But instead of showing examples of the bad thing he's trying to convince us of, he shows us clips of something that we've already accepted as bad. Maybe he didn't intend for this to be propagandistic, but that's what he just did. Good intentions or not. Let's continue with the clips of North Korea where everybody expected to see clips of protest demonstrations.
I mean, think about the black squares, which I mocked in my previous video as being dumb, stupid, and ridiculous virtue signaling.
That is one well thought out, intelligent, honest argument. Dumb, stupid, and ridiculous. I've never seen a syllogism constructed quite like that, where there aren't any premises, just the conclusion. But it's on point. I wonder if he does that in any other areas of his life.
This social justice cult that we are starting to see form.
Let's continue.
Remember, the purpose of those black squares was so that you would not take up space with your normal selfies or food pictures or whatever other nonsense that you typically would post on Instagram.
Wait. What? The goal was not to take up space? Who said that was the goal? Was that you? Did you say that was the goal? Whoever came up with that idea has no idea how social media algorithms work. Obviously, I do know how social media networks and algorithms work because I work with it for a living. It's my job. And I was a software engineer before this. So maybe some lone nut came in and said that's the purpose, but I never heard that as an explanation for the purpose of the black square thing from any official organizations who promoted it. I don't know, maybe they did. If they did, then they need to replace their social media team with somebody more competent because their reasoning betrays that they have absolutely no idea how this shit works.
However, if the goal was to not take up space and to leave these platforms open for Black Lives Matter activists in order for their voices to be able to get more reach because there's nothing else distracting people from it, then why would you put up a black square that literally does nothing but take up space?
Yes, exactly. I agree. What you're presenting is absurd. I can't imagine any competent organization citing that as their reasoning. Wait, I think I see what happened here. Are you using the straw man fallacy? Is that what's happening here?
It's because in reality, the goal of the black square was not to not take up space. The goal of the black square was performative grief. It was to show that you were aligned with the cause. It's the demonstration of you not taking up space, even though that demonstration in and of itself, by its very nature, takes up space.
Oh, now we come full circle with the North Korea thing. Performative grief. So what he's doing here is a propaganda technique called appeal to motives. It's related to the ad hominem attack. He's attacking the honesty or genuineness behind a movement, implying that anybody who supports the movement is doing it for disingenuous reasons. They're doing it because they don't want to be attacked or because they think it'll benefit them in some way. It's at the heart of the virtue signaling accusation. What is virtue signaling anyways? I hear that from people constantly. Here's a definition. The action or practice of publicly expressing opinion or sentiments intended to demonstrate one's good character or the moral correctness of one's position on a particular issue. The underlying implication is that the virtue signaler doesn't actually have the virtue they're claiming to have, or they don't really feel that way. They're only doing it publicly for personal gain. So he's saying that somebody who uses a black square is doing it to virtue signal. That's assuming their motives, and firmly falls in the appeal to motives fallacy and propaganda technique. Again, whether he intended for it to be propagandistic or fallacious or not, doesn't really matter. That's what it is. Let's continue.
But while the counterproductive nature is worthy of being focused on in a logical world, you have to understand that we're dealing with a cult-like organization that doesn't really rely on logic.
He's using a lot of cult language here, and I don't feel like it's warranted. Either way, I can agree with his complaints. I just can't agree with his characterization of the entire movement. Which organization are we talking about? Which organization is cult-like and doesn't rely on logic? He hasn't named an organization. He hasn't even named a general movement like Black Lives Matter, unless I missed it, and I've been listening pretty closely. Is it just anybody who's protesting? Who's he talking about?
The point of the black square was to show that you are not one of the bad people, that you are in line with the movement that's going on around the country. But more importantly, it was supposed to demonstrate who isn't in line with the movement, who to block, who to excommunicate from your circles.
Again, he's assuming everybody's motives. Nobody is actually disgusted by how minorities are treated in this country. Let's just be honest. You're just using the black squares so you aren't attacked for not supporting the movement. That's this dude's whole premise.
That's what we're seeing. Performative grief that is showing everybody else how loyal you are to the cause in order to avoid the negative consequences of not being seen to be loyal enough to that cause.
There you go. He outright says it there. Nobody actually cares about this cause. They're just showing support so they don't lose their friends and loved ones. That's completely absurd. There's no basis for assuming people's motives like that. It's a logical fallacy. You need to rewind, erase that premise from your paper, and start over. You know, I didn't post a black square on any of my social media, and nobody criticized me for it. I don't know, maybe this exists and I'm just not in those spaces to see it. But I'm reasonably big on social media, so I should see at least some instances of what he's talking about. I talk about this issue a lot on Twitter, but I haven't said a word about it on my YouTube channel, at least not up until now. And nobody's criticized me for not using my biggest platform, coming up on 200,000 subscribers, to give this movement oxygen. They don't seem to give a shit what I do with my platforms. The fact that I haven't seen any examples of it implies, at least to me, that he's engaging in the nut-picking fallacy again, picking out these weird fringe examples and using them to prove his conclusion. If that's actually happening, and it's a mainstream thing, and I'm somehow just completely immune to it, then sure, he's right. That's wrong, and we should call it out. I don't agree with that. People should show their support for movements to the degree to which they're comfortable. I'm not upset with any ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who aren't taking part in activism against the organization. Maybe you can't. Maybe you're afraid of expressing how you feel about something to people on your feed. I don't know your personal situation. I'm not going to get upset with anybody for keeping silent on any issue because I'm not in their shoes. Lead, follow, or get out of the way. Some ex-Jehovah's Witnesses choose to get out of the way. Any of those three are fine with me.
You don't even have to read into being unfollowed or losing friends on personal social media accounts in order to see this. Activists actually straight up say this, that they're watching and they're encouraging their people, their followers, their true believers in the cult to watch the people that they know to see if they perform well enough so that they can excommunicate them, so that they can burn them for doing or saying the wrong thing, or not doing or not saying the right thing.
So after this clip, he plays 3 clips of people saying they're watching what people on their social media feeds are doing, and they're unhappy with the fact that some of them aren't saying anything. I'm not going to play them for copyright and time constraint reasons, but the clips come from 3 people I'd never heard of. Jelani Aladdin, who's apparently a Broadway actor. Some people in my audience probably know who it is. I just don't watch Broadway stuff. The next one is from Tramel Logan, apparently a fitness influencer. Again, maybe they're pretty famous. I have no idea. And finally, a video from Savannah Trepzinski. I hope I'm pronouncing these right. She's the executive director of the Shelton E. Henderson Center for Social Justice. Again, never heard of them, but who knows? Maybe they're pretty notable. Either way, even if these people really do feel the way he says they do, which I'm having trouble accepting based on his history of distorting things, he's nutpicking. Generally speaking, people don't give a shit about you or your participation in a movement. Lead, follow, or get out of the way. Nobody said shit to me about whether or not I'm giving this movement enough oxygen. Now, I will grant you this. I have been criticized for not giving certain specific movements enough oxygen with my channel. Not this one, but others. And I'll say unequivocally, I think that's stupid. I can do what I want with my channel. You have no idea what I'm doing behind the scenes to help people. Just because I'm not being an activist in the way you want me to be an activist doesn't mean I'm not helping. So there you go. One thing he and I agree on. But obviously that's something that pretty much every one of my subscribers agrees with too, considering the fact that I haven't had any pushback on how much or how little I've publicly addressed this issue. This video is 19 minutes long and I just don't have that kind of time, so there's one more section I want to address. Let's take a look at the next clip.
That's not because you happen to get a bad officer. That's due to systemic structures of racism. Anything proves the narrative.
I can't tell if he's joking or not, but either way, it's pretty funny. This video is getting pretty long, so let me get to the main point. This guy made an academic claim about something. I'm not sure what. He said this organization earlier, but didn't specify which one he's talking about. He said it's a cult, and it's built around bad logic. I've been addressing cults on my channel for 4 years. I would love to examine this from an academic perspective and try to determine if this unknown organization has any cult-like qualities, as I do with lots of groups, but it's not really possible until I know which specific group he's talking about. Social justice isn't a group, it's a political system at best, a movement, a category, and categories can't be cults, only groups. So come back with something a little more solid than that, and try doing some real research on a subject before throwing the word cult around, brother. Anyways, that's all I've got for you. If you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, you can support me on Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check out my Teespring or my Etsy store. I sell all kinds of interesting stuff on Etsy, but a couple of my favorite things are these signs. If you don't want Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons coming to your door, get these. I also sell these candle holders. If you're sick of 2020 and what it has to throw at us, or if you want a plain-faced one with no text, I sell these dumpster fire candle holders that I 3D print myself. Links to all this stuff are in the description and the pinned comment. Okay? Thanks for watching, guys.